Back then, let's talk about the commodity space. Then we have with us an expert, Jonathan Barrett of ASL Alliance, joins us currently. Hi, Jonathan. Good morning from here in India. Thanks so much for joining in. The last time around, you told us that you'll sit on the sidelines a bit till, in fact, the dust settles. Now it appears at least we got one trigger out of the way. What would you do with gold? Would you be positive on gold from here? I remember you had a long-standing bullish call on gold, and then you said, let's sit on the sidelines for some time. Where do we go from here on gold?
Absolutely. I think when you look at gold, I think we've got to really see how the Fed is actually feeding in terms of what the inflationary pressures are, but also more importantly, what the US dollar is going to do. So I think when we listen to what the Fed has said, we listen that things are going to be gradual, inflation is going to be gradual in itself. I think that we're not going to get much price pressure to the top side when we look at the inflation side. But one area I'm going to focus on a little bit more, I guess, is what we're going to see with the US dollar given the change. There's certainly a lot of rhetoric out there suggesting the dollar will appreciate, likewise bearishness. I have a bearish rhetoric on the US dollar at the moment, and I think that will support the gold market. Remember, gold's been in such a range, tested the lows a few times, so technically you'd find that it would want to get support, and I think it will get that support when we know from investors who believe that the US dollar will be weaker. We'll also get that support from those inflationary watchers as well, which suggesting that with growth must come inflation. So perhaps it's an area to start to move into.
Okay. Hi, Jonathan. Good morning, and thanks so much for joining in. What about dollar-denominated commodities? Generally, when we see rate hikes by the U.S. economy, the dollar strengthens, and that hurts many of the commodities. So where would you stand on that argument? Is that
I'd actually think when you look at the dollar, yes, a lot of the commodities are based in US dollars, but a lot of commodities are on major lows. And we really have to look at the structural weaknesses that will come as a result of a strengthening dollar actually hurting a lot of those producers. And I think when you actually look at some of the commodities like oil, for instance, how many companies are actually paying out there as a result of the low prices. Sure, there are companies which are benefiting very well, like the airlines and the transport sector, but you have to look at the economy as a whole. So I think if the dollar continued to strengthen and those commodities continue to weaken, then I think you'll have structural problems in some of the economies. And I think that's also one reason why we've seen the US government look to lift that 40-year ban on exports of oil from the US.
All right, Jonathan, so let's get this right now. You expect the US dollar to weaken a tad bit. That's going to be good for gold. But from the commodity space, what would be your pick? Would you look at copper? Would you look at zinc? Any of the base metals you like?
Yeah, look, I think at the moment we should be looking at more, more positioning in terms of Q1, Q2 next year. Because if you look at the whole commodity complex, some of them, particularly copper, has been in these ranges for such a long time. And in my mind, that supports it. So I'm an advocate for copper moving higher. So I think that's something I'd want to put back in my portfolio. I also can't think of why oil, where would oil trade down to $25 and $30 a barrel? Or should it pick up given the US economy is picking up? So I think once again, if I was a hedger or a consumer of oil, particularly from India, then I'd look to be covering some of my exposure at these levels.
And one final word on the dollar index. Where do you see it headed?
Look, I think with the volatility I saw last night, which was quiet, I'd actually think Q1, Q2, that you could see that into the low 90s and eventually down to that 85. So as you can see, I'm a little bit bearish US dollar.
All right, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining and giving us a quick take on the US dollar as well as on a whole basket of commodities.